Hello everyone. Today we're going to be discussing the case of Otto Warmbier, who is an American student who decided to go to North Korea for a vacation to see the country, and it turned into him and his family's worst nightmare. Otto Warmbier was born December 12th of 1994 in Cincinnati, Ohio to Cynthia and Fred Warmbier. He was also the oldest of his two other siblings, Austin and Greta. As he got older, Otto attended Wyoming High School and graduated in 2013, with people describing him as popular and studious. GQ saying, and I quote, "He was also a math whiz and a gifted soccer player and swimmer, and as if it wasn't enough that he was prom king, his peers anointed him with a plastic crown at homecoming," end quote. Although Otto's family was well off, he was described as being friendly with everyone, and he often liked to wear thrifted Hawaiian shirts. At his graduation, he would also quote The Office, saying, and I quote, "I wish there was a way to know when you're in the good days before you've actually left them," end quote.
This is our last day together as Wyoming High School's class of 2013. Tomorrow morning, we will all belong to another class, another job, or another city.
After high school, Otto then enrolled at the University of Virginia, majoring in both commerce and economics and minoring in global sustainability. His goal at the time was to become a banker. In Otto's junior year, he won a finance internship, and he'd also attend a foreign exchange at the London School of Economics. He was also an active member at his fraternity Theta Chi. Now, on top of all of that, Otto was also a person who was very interested in different cultures. He had visited Israel, Cuba, Ecuador, and also parts of Europe. And with winter break approaching, Otto decided he wanted to go on an adventure to take a break from his schooling and explore a new place before interning on Wall Street. He was planning on studying abroad as well in Hong Kong, and one of his professors recommended going on a tour. So Otto decided while he was in China, he would visit one of the world's most oppressed countries, North Korea. Now, despite North Korea promoting propaganda online saying that it's the best country in the world, in reality it's known as a very extreme, harsh dictatorship that is known to imprison and often execute its own citizens if they attempt to flee. Now, despite that, North Korea actually does allow foreigners to come visit on very tightly controlled tours. And I think it said that 1,000 Americans visit North Korea a year, which is something that I never knew you can even do. I didn't even know you could go visit North Korea, and I don't know why 1,000 people would want to, considering North Korea seems to hate America, especially if you look into their propaganda, and we will talk a lot more about that after. And after hearing Otto's story, I think you will agree that going on one of these tours to North Korea is probably one of the worst decisions anyone could make, especially if you are American. Otto, however, was very curious, and he planned his trip with a group called Young Pioneer Tours, which specializes in low-budget excursions to, and I quote, "destinations your mother would rather you stay away from," end quote. And I went and looked on their website, and they actually have a lot of excursions to different parts of the world, especially countries and cities that you shouldn't go to according to, security alerts by the government, whether there be, wars there or just be highly dangerous to visit. If you want to go to those places, Young Pioneer Tours is for you. And it was for Otto because he ended up putting down a $1,200 deposit for a 5-day, 4-night New Year's Eve party tour, again, in North Korea. A New Year's Eve party tour in North Korea does not sound like a sentence that should be coming out of my mouth. The last place you'd think to go to party. Otto would soon learn from a confirmation email that his visa would be arranged by the company and it would be presented to him by the tour group when they met at the Beijing airport. Again, keep in mind, even at this time, and I'm pretty sure to this day, the American government has an advisory against traveling there, and his parents also seemed to not be pleased that he was going to visit North Korea. But Otto was going to do what Otto wanted to do. He was an adult. He can make his own decisions. And, he was curious about visiting this country. And, please don't take what I'm saying as me victim shaming or anything. But I want to make it clear that I do not agree with people going to visit there and going to travel there. And on top of that, just from the little bit that I've learned about North Korea, that place scares me and I would never want to step even close to it. On December 29th of 2015, Otto and his tour group, which included 10 other US citizens, flew from Beijing to North Korea. In Pyongyang, they ended up visiting an American Navy ship called the USS Pueblo that was seized by North Korea in 1968. It said that 82 American soldiers were captured, beaten, and starved for nearly a year before North Korea released them. There was allegedly also a North Korean citizen on this tour that ended up saying to the group that they had captured, and I quote, "the imperial enemy," unquote, which seemed to make a lot of them uneasy because, again, there were about 11 people on this tour that were American, and the North Koreans are calling the Americans the imperial enemies. And I think it started to sink in a little bit that they may have been on enemy soil. There are also said to be a lot of propaganda billboards showing missiles blasting the White House. Now, despite all of that, they tried to laugh it all off and they turned it into a joke, nicknaming Otto the imperial enemy. Now, also keep in mind that the areas that these tours happen in North Korea are kind of described to be like Disneyland. They're basically an illusion for tourists to see, and beyond the borders of the city where the tourists are allowed, there's said to be starving villages as well as possible concentration camps. On New Year's Eve, it's said that the Young Pioneer tour group ended up celebrating in Kim Il-sung Square watching the fireworks.
We're here in Kim Il-sung Square, and it's absolutely packed with people. Happy New Year from Pyongyang.
After that, it's said that they celebrated by going for drinks at a fancy bar that tourists were allowed to go to. And then after that, they ended up eventually returning to the international hotel that they were staying at. This hotel is known as the Alcatraz of Fun. It's a 27-story hotel having 5 restaurants, a bar, a sauna, massage parlors, and even a bowling alley.
We're at the Gakdo International Hotel. We're in the lobby. This hotel is 47 stories in total. It was completed in 1995, and we're going to show you all the facilities and everything this hotel has to offer for all the tourists that come into Pyongyang in North Korea. So guys, this is the mail center, and this is where you come to send postcards back to your friends and family, which is very nice. The stamps are about €1, so it's very cheap, and it takes about 3 months max to reach your home country. And for those who want to call their mummy while they're in North Korea, it's possible, so you can do international phone calls from the hotel. But make it quick because they're expensive. We have the supermarket where you can stock up on water, more beer, coffee, Korean lollies. Now we're in the Gakdo International Hotel bookstore where there's all the complete works of Kim Il-sung, Kim Jong-il, and Kim Jong-un. Anecdotes of Kim Jong-il's life. This is volume 3. It's the souvenir store where they've got chocolate or hanboks. Ping pong! It's not quite good for tall people. Now I'm about to take you guys into the billiards room. Let's check it out. Hey guys, how are we? Now this is one of my favorite rooms. Bowling! Equipment, new TV, new scoring points. Good place to finish the evening after a long day. Behind these doors we have the Sinful Room, the Sinful Lounge, also known as karaoke. Quiet right now, but it's a little too early in the evening, but they have songs in Chinese, Korean, and English. So in here we have the swimming, sauna, massage, and face massage. It's a 25-meter lap pool. It's heated, fantastic during summer, fantastic during winter.
You know, visitors that are at the hotel basically have full reign of the hotel, but there's only one rule. You're not allowed to go to the 5th floor. And this seems to be pressed to anyone that's visiting there. You don't go to the 5th floor. It's even a floor that's skipped on the elevators that you can't even get there by the elevator. You have to take like a back staircase to even get to this floor. And there's been a lot of questions as to why you shouldn't or can't go to the 5th floor. And considering everything that North Korea is said to be, I don't know why this vlogger decided to take it upon himself. I was scared watching it. He got out alive, he got out fine, but the risk that he took, this vlogger ended up sneaking onto the 5th floor at the International Hotel there, and he ended up vlogging it, and this is what he ended up finding.
So in 2011, he and some friends snuck onto the 5th floor.
Mysterious 5th floor.
And videotaped it.
What goes on here? Nobody knows.
You notice that the floor you go onto when you go from 4 to 5 is a lot shorter and had paintings.
It's not artwork on the wall, but rather propaganda. Military first, powerful nation, reads this one. But perhaps the most disturbing is this, featuring a bomb with USA on it. Revenge 100 times, 1,000 times to American wolves. Calvin and his friends had no trouble on the 5th floor that night, but others might not be so lucky.
Now, again, thankfully, he got out alive. He ended up being able to post this video online so people can now see what's on the 5th floor. It doesn't honestly look anything that sketchy. But back to the night of New Year's Eve with Otto and the Young Pioneers. There's a couple different versions of the night that I've seen spoken about by different young pioneers that were on this tour. First, we have Danny Granton, who is a 40-year-old greeting card salesman who was also Otto's roommate. Now, the version of events I've seen that Danny says is that he ended up going to the bowling alley that night while the others went back to the bar, and at this point, he said he lost track of Otto. And because of this, there's this 2-hour window where Otto allegedly isn't accounted for, or at least Danny didn't know where he was. Now, keep in mind, they were probably all really fucking drunk because they had been partying in the square. They were going out to these fancy bars drinking. It seems there's a lot of drinking going on here. So I'm sure that may skew memories and time frames. However, Danny claims he went back to their hotel room around 4:30 in the morning on January 1st, and Otto was asleep in bed when he got there. So keep in mind, that's kind of one time frame version of events that I've seen from Danny. There's going to be some more we're going to talk about in a little bit. But the following morning, the Young Pioneers had a plan to go on a helicopter tour of the city. Later that day, Otto was also seen posing in pictures with the Young Pioneers at the Grand Monument. And then later on with, North Korean people. There's a bunch of photos of him playing in the snow with them, playing with children. But later that day is when the Young Pioneers were set to return back to China. Danny and Otto were at the airport with the rest of the group, and they were ready to return to Beijing. But they were the last in the group to go through security. According to Danny, they presented their passports to the officers, and the officers held their documents for an uncomfortable amount of time. It seems like these officers were really scrutinizing their documents. Until out of nowhere, 2 soldiers ended up marching over to them, tapping Otto on the shoulder, and then they kind of whisked Otto away. And the way Danny describes it is that they thought it was kind of a joke. And I'll play what Danny had to say here.
2 guards took him away, and I sort of laughingly said to him, well, that's the last we'll ever see of you. And because we got on so well, Otto turned around and just chuckled at me. But of course there was a huge irony in my words that we obviously didn't know what was going to happen, but that was the last time anyone actually saw him.
But either way, Otto was whisked away, and from that moment on, Otto would never be a free man again. His life would be completely over. According to a Canadian teacher named Sarah, who was part of Otto's tour, she said that herself, including a few of the other Young Pioneers, ended up protesting that they did not want to board the plane until, they were told something about Otto, what was happening to Otto. They wanted answers. But she says that officers with machine guns ended up coming and forcing them to board the plane. So they couldn't even stay in North Korea and figure out what was going on with Otto. They ended up then being told that Otto was sick and that they needed treatment and that they were going to give him treatment.
Left Saturday morning, and Otto was held back, still trying to figure out why.
This is the last footage of Otto as a free man, throwing snowballs with his tour with some children in North Korea, and that's sad. But what happened? Why was Otto taken away? It would end up that Otto was arrested. Why was this 21-year-old American tourist being arrested on North Korean soil? Well, it would be 3 weeks before the North Korean government announced that Otto had been arrested and charged with what is called hostile acts against the state. So what does that mean? Well, it means that they were charging Otto with stealing a framed propaganda poster from the walls of a restricted area in the hotel on the 5th floor. And their proof was a very, very grainy CCTV footage of a figure taking the poster off the wall. Now here's the thing about this CCTV footage. As you can see in the footage, there is a timestamp of 1:57 a.m. on New Year's Day. Now, according to members of Otto's tour who hung out with him all night, Otto wasn't even at the hotel before 2 a.m., meaning he wasn't at the hotel during the time period of the CCTV footage. And even if he wasn't accounted for in Danny's timeline where he said, he lost track of him for 2 hours and he returned back to the hotel room at 4:30 a.m., that means Danny's seen Otto at least at 2:30. How was Otto on the 5th floor if he was with at least Danny and, the rest of the group at 2:30? It doesn't make sense. On top of that, according to Sarah's timeline of events, they hadn't even gotten back to the hotel until closer to 3 a.m.
I remember getting back to the hotel somewhere around 3 a.m., not at all before 2 a.m.
So that's not even close to 2 a.m. You're saying it was more than an hour after that video was supposedly shot that you and Otto returned to the hotel?
Correct. Everything about the whole story was fabricated, in my opinion.
And you can see there's tons of photos of Sarah and Otto together. So she, in fact, was with him on the trip. It's not like she's just some random person making this up. She was on that tour. She was hanging out with him. It seems like they all hung out as a group because they probably didn't know anyone else. You know, they're all on this tour together. They're in this foreign place. It's not like you can go off and explore really much because, again, it's all very strictly, you know, controlled on what people can see there and what you can do. So, you know, the options they had were to do the stuff that they were already doing, going to the bars, hanging out at the hotel, stuff like that. It's not like they were just wandering through the city doing whatever. On top of that, if you keep in mind the vlogger that went to the 5th floor and vlogged the 5th floor, clearly it isn't as restricted as it seems if this guy could sneak onto the 5th floor and film it and get out and post it on the internet and, you know, have no repercussions. So clearly there could be options of people going to this floor other than Otto. Again, if the timeline is correct, Otto wasn't even at the hotel at that point in time. So how would he be on this footage? Meanwhile, American State Department worker Robert King was going through his emails and was alerted to Otto's arrest. Now, according to his experience with having more than a dozen imprisoned Americans released, the North Koreans were going to first force Otto to confess to undermining the regime. They would then tape a speech that would be used as a domestic propaganda to convince the North Koreans that Americans sought to destroy them. Again, the North Koreans really seem to hate Americans, so this would work in favor to them. This American stealing something from them, you know, damaging the image of their almighty leader. You know, they're super strict about saying anything against the leaders or doing anything, you know, even minutely against or ill-willed or even saying anything bad against the leaders. Again, there is no like freedom of speech, freedom of information, nothing like that in North Korea. So keep that in mind. Robert King then says that after that, Otto would then be likely imprisoned and his freedom would be used as a bargaining chip by the North Koreans to extract a visit from a high-level American dignitary or concessions in nuclear or sanctioned negotiations. And Robert King was correct because a month later, a televised confession was released of Otto reading off of a script that people think he was forced to read. From this handwritten script, he read that he put on his quietest boots, the best for sneaking, and attempted the theft at the promoting of a local Methodist church, a university secret society, and the American administration to harm the work ethic and motivations of the Korean people and bring home a trophy. So I'm going to play what a lot of people think Otto was forced to say right now.
Walks stiffly into the room, head bowed, flanked by his North Korean guards. Then, 21-year-old American Otto Warmbier, a student at the University of Virginia, appears to break down.
I entirely beg you, people and government of the DPR Korea, for your forgiveness. Please, I have made the worst mistake of my life.
Warmbier reads a statement saying he committed a crime in the eyes of North Korea, taking down a pro-regime political banner from the staff area of a hotel.
Please, act to save me. Please, think of my family.
CNN cannot verify if Warmbier was forced to read from a script, but Kim Jong-un's regime has made others do the same.
So now that you've seen and heard that, keep in mind, Otto wasn't associated with the Methodist Church or Christianity or anything like that at all because he was actually Jewish. So his speech in general just doesn't make sense that he'd say he stole this poster to bring back to like the Catholic, Methodist, whatever church, because he isn't even associated with that religion. So right there off the bat, people think that this is all staged, it's all scripted, and they forced him to do this, let alone Robert King, who has years of experience in this, also said this was going to happen. Either way, Otto would end up being sentenced to 15 years of hard labor, and he would sign his fingerprint in an appearance at the Supreme Court in Pyongyang on March of 2016.
This morning, 21-year-old Otto Warmbier is behind bars in North Korea, sentenced to 15 years in a North Korean prison with hard labor. A visibly shaken Warmbier paraded before cameras, speaking at his trial Wednesday, which only lasted 1 hour.
I was used and manipulated. Please, act to save me. Please save my life.
Warmbier was found guilty of what the government calls subversion, part of the U.S. hostile policy towards North Korea. In court, they showed this video, accusing Warmbier of trying to steal a political banner from an area off limits to foreigners
at the hotel where he was staying with the tour group.
Now, on top of all of that, I just said he was sentenced to 15 years in prison for hard labor. Keep in mind, Otto's trial was only around 1 hour long, and he was not allowed to have a defense. He didn't have a lawyer. The North Koreans don't operate like a majority of the world. People don't seem to have rights there. You do not have a right to an attorney there. You do not have a right to defend yourself there. You are not innocent until proven guilty there. It basically is like they declared him guilty right away, and there was no chance to defend himself, and they essentially kidnapped him. They said, he did it, we don't care, here's our evidence, this grainy footage, we don't want to hear anyone say otherwise. He's just guilty, which is insane. He was being put in prison for 15 years of hard labor for allegedly stealing a poster. And in my opinion, just knowing the whole time frame of, the rest of the tour with him, he wasn't even there when it happened, which is it's crazy. This case is so crazy over a poster. So Otto is put into prison, and it turns out his situation is a lot more complicated than just, bargaining to get him free. It turns out that America doesn't really have intelligence inside of North Korea, and they also don't have a diplomatic relationship with them either, meaning that they have to go through Sweden to even negotiate. This meant that Otto's family had to wait weeks while the US government waited for Sweden to send emails back and forth and then send them back to the US. And apparently those emails by Sweden to North Korea were being stonewalled. Otto's family, however, was able to be in contact with this man named Bill Richardson, who was a United Nations ambassador who specializes in under-the-radar fringe diplomacies to release hostages from hostile regimes or criminal organizations. Richardson had also previously helped free several Americans from North Korea, and coincidentally also had a very strong relationship with what is called the New York Channel, which is basically where the North Korean representatives in the United Nations headquarters in Manhattan kind of go to negotiate things, it seems like. And they often serve as like a go-between for Washington and Pyongyang. Now, as Trump moved into the American office, things seemed to start moving. A Swedish ambassador would end up being allowed to go to North Korea, but was only allowed to visit with one American prisoner there, and this prisoner ended up not being Otto. Eventually, as the years went on, Robert King would also end up having to retire, and Otto's case would eventually go to a man named Joseph Yun. It wouldn't be until June of 2017, after demanding for over a year for someone to even put their eyes on Otto. Because up until now, no one had seen him since that TV appearance that he'd made where he'd confessed, allegedly confessed. But in June of 2017, Joseph Yun ended up being contacted by North Korea and told that Otto was unconscious. Joseph would end up arguing that given Otto's health, Pyongyang had to free him on humanitarian grounds. North Korea would then be informed that an American plane was going to land in Pyongyang and with diplomats and doctors that were going to assess and bring Otto home. And it seemed like North Korea ended up eventually agreeing to this. Joseph Yun would end up explaining, and I quote, "The North Koreans said we could send a delegation to see Otto, but that we would have to discuss some of the conditions of getting him out once we got there," end quote. And I can't imagine how scary it would have been flying over there, not knowing if it was going to be a warm welcome or if it was going to turn into another crime scene. Just keep in mind, you're flying into enemy territory. And as far as they would know, they could fly there and also just disappear. Now, thankfully, that's not what happened. The officials would fly there and they would end up landing safely, and they were ushered off the plane to a room where they would end up starting to argue for Otto's freedom. And eventually, Joseph Yun would be able to see Otto, and his state was not good. Otto would end up being found in an ICU room. He was very pale and he had feeding tubes placed. North Korean doctors would end up explaining to Joseph Yun that Otto had been in the hospital in a coma for over a year. Otto's brain scans showing that he had experienced extensive brain damage, meaning Otto hadn't been in perfect health for the last year or more when, North Korea and their intelligence had said he was fine, and meaning that something very, very terrible had happened to him pretty much as soon as he was put into prison. Otto also appeared to have an old tracheotomy scar from having a machine to breathe for him, and there's a lot of other extensive things that seem to have happened to him, which we'll talk about in a little bit when he finally returns home. But despite that scar and his state, it seems like the hospital cared for him pretty well. He apparently didn't have any bed sores and he seemed well nourished. Now, after another day or so of arguing Otto's freedom, North Korea finally agreed to release Otto and send him home. Now, strangely enough, the same day that Otto was released, former NBA player Dennis Rodman was also in North Korea. And it also turns out that Dennis Rodman is really good friends with Kim Jong-un, who is apparently a huge basketball fan, which I didn't know any of this, and it was such a strange plot twist in this case that Dennis Rodman popped up in this.
Their friendship began in 2013 when Rodman visited North Korea as part of a basketball delegation.
He's my friend for life. I don't care what you guys think about him.
Rodman went on to visit North Korea several more times, on one occasion even singing Kim Jong-un happy birthday.
Happy birthday to you.
The athlete, now appearing to be more like an aspiring diplomat, is one of the few people in the world who has a personal relationship with both Kim Jong-un and President Trump.
Another twist is, according to Dennis Rodman's agent, he personally asked delegates in North Korea to release Otto on a good faith to continue their sports relationship. So there's this whole twist in this case where Dennis Rodman is apparently involved in Otto's release. Now, according to the U.S. State Department heads, as well as Otto's father, they say and they deny that Dennis Rodman had anything to do with Otto's release. Now, I was actually shocked to see that Young Pioneer Tours, after everything that happened with Otto, is still doing tours in North Korea till this day. I don't know why, after what happened to Otto, they would continue to do these tours there. You think it would have been a sign to maybe shut them down, keep doing tours other places, but when one of the people on your tour gets arrested and then, kidnapped and, murdered by the country you're taking them to, it just doesn't seem smart to continue or ethical to continue to do these tours. But alas, Young Pioneers is still going strong with their tours to North Korea, which is, again, shocking. 2 days after their return to the U.S., Otto's father took stage at Otto's high school and told everyone that they were trying to make him comfortable. After his son had returned in a vegetative state, Fred took this as a sign to refocus and get justice for Otto. Otto, who was once, young, bright, and full of life, was now severely brain damaged. His teeth were said to no longer be straight, and he had a large scar on his foot. He was also said to be blind, deaf, and to be making a howling sound as well as convulsing. According to the New York Times, the government had obtained that Otto had been repeatedly beaten. Within 2 days of returning, Otto spiked a 104-degree fever, and eventually his feeding tube would be removed by doctors after they made the call that Otto would never regain consciousness again. 6 days after Otto returned to the U.S., he would end up dying. Hundreds of people lined the streets to witness Otto's hearse, wearing American flags and making a W with their hands to represent his high school. In September, Fred and Sydney would end up going on a show called Fox and Friends, calling North Koreans terrorists who had intentionally injured their son. Fred graphically described damage to Otto's teeth and his foot as a result of torture and demanded that the administration punish the dictatorship. During an interview with 60 Minutes Australia, Fred ended up describing North Korea's regime as a disgusting criminal enterprise, comparing them to thugs in a concentration camp. Shortly after Fred and Cindy's interviews, President Trump would end up showing his approval by tweeting great interviews and noting that Otto was in a, quote, torture beyond belief by North Korea, end quote. Fred would also end up hiring a lawyer that was pretty famous, pretty well known because he represented VP Mike Pence, and he hired this lawyer as he attempted to take legal action against North Korea. Later that month, President Trump would also designate North Korea as a state sponsor of terrorism, stating, and I quote, "As we take this action today, our thoughts turn to Otto Warmbier," unquote. Sarah, that Canadian teacher who was also on Otto's tour, would end up also speaking out, saying that she believes Otto's arrest was planned by the North Korean regime. So I think the main theory is that Otto was basically framed that North Korea was using him as an example to their people, and that he in fact did not actually steal that poster. Again, he didn't even have a proper trial, to the standards of modern day North America. There's another theory that also says that Otto was framed and that it was a carefully calibrated act that was linked directly to North Korea's weapons program. Basically that they were using Otto as a excuse to fire their nuclear weapons because he was American and that they'd, threatened North Korea. His mother thinks that they were also using him to rub it in America's face because just days after Otto was arrested, North Korea tested a nuclear attack for the first time in 3 years, followed by launching a long-range missile.
We wrote son, brother, and friend, and that was just him. Everyone loved him. Absolutely everybody that met Otto loved him. It's such a big loss.
So, how do you all feel about Otto's case? Because I actually have seen quite a bit of people online saying that Otto, not that he deserved what happened to him, but that he was like a punk that was stealing something and like should follow the rules of North Korea if he wanted to go there. I've seen a lot of like disgusting, in my opinion, hate towards this poor dude that, in my opinion, and it seems like the main majority of people's, was framed. And I don't know if they're just saying that because they don't know the full story and they haven't looked into it enough, or if there is some kind of evidence besides this grainy footage that they know about that no one else does. But I don't know. This case it's sad. My thoughts are with Otto's family, and I don't think Otto deserved what happened to him. Even if he did some way, somehow steal that poster, I don't think he should have been put into a coma. I think we can all fully agree with that. He should not have been put into the state he was. He should not have been tortured. He should not have been beaten for stealing a poster, allegedly, if he did. Besides the fact that the evidence against him is ridiculous, in my opinion. But how do you all feel about Otto's story? Do you think that young pioneers should still be running trips to North Korea? Because I fully do not think they should be. And is there anything that I ended up leaving out of this video that you think is important? Let's chat about it down below. But at the end of the day, I think Otto's story is something that we should all look at and say, sometimes taking risks aren't worth it when it's something like this. But I do think Otto's story is a lesson to be learned that if you're going to be going to a country like that, there's other countries in the world like that too. Just really keep in mind the risk that you're putting yourself at, because not only is the country, maybe hostile at that point in time, there might be flags on it by the government saying don't go there. The laws there might be completely different than you're used to, because as we've seen, Otto did not have any rights there. He didn't even get to have a fair trial by, North American standards, modern day standards. And, going to countries like this, you could be tried for the most mundane things compared to things in North America. If you stole a poster here, if you said, I hate the president, you're not going to be going to jail for that. People talk about how much they hate Biden and Trump and this and that and Trudeau every single day in, North America. You don't get arrested for that here. But you go there and you touch or take a poster of, their leader, you're going to jail and you're coming back basically in a coffin. And I think that's something that you need to keep in mind when you're going to places like this, if you're going to take risks going to places like this. So I hope, if anything can come out of Otto's story, to just be more cautious when you're traveling, when you're going to certain places. Make sure you know the rules, make sure you know the laws, and just make sure that you're being as safe as you possibly can be so that you can return home safely. Now, at the end of the day, I also really do hope that Otto's family eventually can get some kind of justice for Otto, because again, I don't think what happened to him should have happened to him, even if he somehow did do what they claim he did. But again, his family is going against a tyrannical regime. I don't know how it's going to end, but I'm crossing my fingers and I'm hoping that they can get some kind of justice. So again, let's have a chat about this below. And if you're not subscribed, I do recommend hitting that subscribe button. It allows me to continue to create content like this, tell these people's stories, spread the word of stories like this, and hopefully we can help make the world a safer place, if not a better place. And, I think it's important to talk about tales of caution, because spreading information is how, the human race has survived as long as it has. And with that, I hope you all stay safe out there. Lock your windows and doors. Again, please be safe when you're traveling, and I hope to see you all in the next video. Bye.